Gentlemen, that nagging feeling inside your leg that goes all the way up there, that could be coming from persistent tension in the groin. So naturally, you want to be proactive, so you start stretching your inner thighs and hip flexors over and over again. But then, the tightness comes right back. If that sounds familiar, the problem might be that you don't actually need to increase your stretching frequency. Sometimes, the real issue is that the muscles on the outside and back of the hip, the deep hip rotators and the glutes, are poorly coordinated, and the inside muscles of the leg are working overtime to compensate. I'm Junichi Swope, a men's pelvic floor physiotherapist, and when we refer to the groin, we're talking about a group of muscles called the adductors. These muscles run along the inner thigh and attach to the inside of the thigh bone, otherwise known as the femur. Their job is to help control movement of the leg into adduction, which is moving the leg towards your body. When these muscles become chronically tight or overactive, they can begin to influence how the femur sits and moves within the socket. One common pattern that I see in men with persistent groin tightness is that the hip begins spending more time in an internally rotated position. And this might not seem like a big deal, but over time, it can absolutely create unwanted imbalances in your hips. To compensate for this pull, the obturator internus, a deep hip muscle, can help rotate the femur outwards, and this can get tight as a consequence as it tries to fight against the midline pull of the adductors in order to keep your pelvis steady. This extra effort makes them easily overworked and tight. The obturator internus sits very close to the pelvic floor and shares important relationships with the muscles of the pelvis, and it's often a culprit in why men get pelvic tension and stiffness. So sometimes the pattern looks something like this. The groin gets tight, then the hip begins moving differently, and the obturator internus becomes overworked. We end up with this low-grade resting discomfort anywhere along the groin, the hip, or the low back, and after a while, the pelvic floor might even get involved. Now, this isn't the only cause of pelvic pain, but it is one possible contributor that is often overlooked. So you can start to appreciate how many men end up getting stuck. They stretch, their groin gets loose for a little while, and just maybe, everything feels great for a few hours. Then, tightness comes back. Why? If the muscles responsible for controlling the hip position aren't doing their job, the body often falls back into the same movement pattern. Groin tightens again, hip rotates inwards again, and the obturator internus gets overworked, and the cycle continues. One important concept to keep in mind is that the obturator internus can be both tight and weak, and in that case, we don't want to maximally load the area immediately, but to restore capacity with the right mix of downregulation, mobility, and graded strengthening. That's why, for persistent groin tension, we often need two things. First, we need to help the groin relax. Second, we need to learn how to improve how the hip controls rotation and stability. Let's start with your home exercise plan. Step 1. Foam roll the adductors. I would only suggest this for people who have a lot of muscle guarding in their leg. If foam rolling feels comfortable for you, start by gently rolling the muscles along the inner thigh. All we're trying to do is simply help the nervous system reduce tension in the area. Nothing complicated. Spend about 30 to 60 seconds on each side, breathe normally, and try to stay relaxed. Step 2. Banded hip rotations. Find a strong band and loop it up to your groin as high as you can. Tie it up to a hard surface that isn't going to go anywhere. Then stand away from the band in a 45-degree angle with strong tension from the band wanting to pull your leg towards the object. Get into a lunge position with your banded leg forwards and perform 180-degree walks with your hands over your lead leg. Do anywhere from 8 to 15 repetitions. As you move your body over your thigh, you want to feel a deep muscle contraction and movement at the hip socket. This exercise effectively mobilizes your hip joint, and it's especially helpful for men with stiff hips. Step 3. Modified split squats with hip rotations. Now we move into the strengthening component. Place one foot against the wall behind you and move into a split squat stance. Drop into a shallow quarter squat and hold. First step is to be able to feel like your glute muscle is engaging and working hard. Cross your arms over your shoulders and slowly rotate your torso left and right. As you rotate, your hip will move through small amounts of internal and external rotation. You should begin to feel the muscles around the hip working, particularly the glutes and the deep hip stabilizers. Perform until you're very fatigued in the targeted muscles. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I like to disregard reps and simply work until you feel a good burn. Step 4. For the final exercise, step into a split lunge position. Lower into a half lunge and feel your glute muscles engage. Think hip back, driving your weight into your heel and leaning your torso forwards. As you do this, rotate your torso away from the front leg. Same idea, we want to feel like the hip rotators are doing their job deep in the glute. And as always, perform until the muscle feels very fatigued. So if you've been dealing with chronic groin tightness, hip clicking, snapping sensations, or maybe it's affecting that tension in your pelvic floor, stretching may only be part of the solution. And if you do have symptoms associated with a non-relaxing pelvic floor, such as smaller urine voids, frequent urination, or pain during any urinary or sexual activity, check out some of the other videos in my YouTube channel where I go a little more in depth on these topics. If you found this video helpful, let me know in the comments, and let me know if you're one of those people who feel more tense in their groin, hip, or your pelvic floor. And as always, if you're dealing with persistent symptoms, consider working with a men's pelvic floor physiotherapist who understands the relationship between the hips, the pelvis, and the pelvic floor. Thanks for watching.